Think of your life as like a rigid engineering blueprint. You go to school, um, you build a career, you hit milestones, you experience losses. It's very linear, you
Oh,
know?
it's highly structured. We like it that way.
Yeah. We're taught to see these events as clear, distinct chapters, separated by these firm boundaries. But if you take that blueprint and step into a forest, that whole rigid structure just dissolves into something, well, something terrifying, but incredibly beautiful. It's just continuous, unbroken transformation. So today, we are looking at the universe and really the chaos of our own minds through the lens of a single drop of water.
Which sounds, I mean, almost too simple, doesn't it?
Totally, just one drop.
But that's actually the brilliance of the narrative we're exploring today. The core premise is that by observing the journey of something as minuscule as a water droplet, we can fundamentally shift how we process the whole human experience. We're stepping away from like cold data and moving into this philosophical space to talk about how we let go of the past, how we survive the chaotic weather of our emotions, and how we actually fit into the interconnected web of life.
So if you are listening to this right now, maybe you're commuting, maybe you're doing the dishes, consider this deep dive a chance to just pause. Because the journey of this droplet starts with a concept that challenges literally everything we know about endings.
Exactly. So the narrative opens high up in the forest canopy. It's dawn, and there's this single water droplet resting on a leaf, and it's dreading the moment it has to fall.
It doesn't want to let go.
Right. It's looking at the forest, desperately clinging to its current state. But before it falls, the leaf imparts this ancient paradigm-shifting wisdom. The leaf explains that in nature, there is no such thing as letting go or death in the tragic way that we conceptualize it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there is only movement.
Right. The leaf says that when its own time is up, it doesn't just, disappear into a void. It drops to the floor, becomes compost, and it feeds the soil. And then the roots take up those exact nutrients, which push new buds out in the spring.
And that is the crux of it right there. It's the conservation of energy. I mean, energy is never created or destroyed. It only transforms. What is dead or finished to one organism simply becomes the literal vitality for another. The leaf tells the droplet the whole is found in every part.
Okay, I have to push back here a little bit because, it's a beautiful thought for a leaf. But for you and me, for humans experiencing real, raw grief, whether that's the loss of a loved one, the end of a marriage, or like getting laid off from a career you identified with hearing it's just a continuous transformation of energy, sounds a little cold, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It sounds dismissive if you don't really dig into it.
Right, so how does this philosophy actually comfort someone in pain?
Well, that is the essential question. It doesn't bypass the pain, but it changes our relationship to it. You see, human suffering is intensely compounded by our belief that a loss is a permanent deletion from the universe.
We think it's just gone forever.
Exactly. When we grieve, we are often mourning that rigidity you mentioned earlier. We're mourning the blueprint. We cling to these outmoded identities like, I am this job or I am this relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The leaf is challenging us to recognize that while the form has changed, the essence hasn't. The love, the lessons, the growth you experienced, that energy is now composted into the soil of who you are becoming. The droplet isn't dying by falling, it's dropping its baggage to enter its next necessary phase.
Dropping its baggage, that makes a lot of sense. The pain comes from resisting gravity. So our droplet finally accepts gravity, it falls, but it doesn't hit the ground right away.
No, it gets intercepted.
Right, it lands right on the silk line of a spider's web, suspended in midair.
Yes, and this creates a really fascinating optical phenomenon. Because of the way water refracts light, if you look closely at this perfectly still, hovering bead of water, it reflects the entire forest around it.
It becomes like a microscopic crystal ball.
Precisely. It reflects the radiant morning colors, the giant eye of the spider, the mushrooms below, even the faded stars above. And the narrative uses this to illustrate the interconnected web of life.
So everything is in the drop.
Everything, whatever you observe in others, already exists within you. You are a mirror to the universe, and the universe is a mirror to you. But, and this is crucial, the physical mechanism making that reflection possible only works in a state of absolute stillness.
Because if the water drop is vibrating or shaking,
The light fractures, exactly.
the image distorts.
Precisely. Only when the water is perfectly still can the light passing through it remain pure. In stillness, it acts as a clear witness to reality.
All right, but let's bring this back to the person listening right now. Again, hanging motionless on a metaphorical spider web reflecting the cosmos sounds lovely for, like, a yoga retreat.
Right.
But in reality, we have deadlines. We have toddlers screaming. We have smartphones buzzing with a million notifications. We are constantly agitated. How on earth do we translate the physical stillness of a water droplet into a chaotic, fast-paced human life?
You're touching on the exact crisis of modern cognition. We are constantly taking in information, just like the droplet takes in light.
Yeah, nonstop.
But because we are constantly agitated by those notifications and demands, our perception of reality is fractured. We don't see clearly, we see distorted threats everywhere. This is why the narrative introduces the practice of mindfulness.
Oh, to find that stillness.
Yes, translating that physical stillness into actionable human behavior through what it calls rituals.
These are these bite-sized mindfulness practices.
Right. It's not about stopping your life. It's about finding internal stillness while the external world keeps spinning. The text details this one called Ritual I Presence of Mind. It asks you to do something radically simple. Just notice exactly where your feet are.
Literally just feel your feet on the ground.
Yep. Observe the colors around you without assigning names or judgments to them. Listen for the loudest sound in your environment, and then seek out the absolute softest sound. It asserts that magic is always available to those present.
I love how actionable that is. I actually want to bring in an analogy for this because I think it perfectly captures what's happening in our brains. Think of your mind like a jar of water filled with glitter.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah. When you're stressed, running late, getting angry emails, it's like someone is violently shaking that jar. You've got this disorienting storm of glitter, and you literally can't see through the water.
That's a brilliant visualization of the brain's default mode network in overdrive.
Right. And our instinct is to fix it. We try to reach into the jar and force the pieces of glitter down to the bottom. We yell at ourselves to calm down.
Which just creates more turbulence.
Exactly. The mindfulness ritual you just described, feeling your feet, listening to the sounds, that's just setting the jar down on the table. You don't fight the glitter. You just sit quietly and let the natural resistance of the water slow the momentum until the glitter settles on its own.
And if we look at the neurobiology of what you're describing, focusing on immediate sensory input like your feet, or the ambient noise literally short-circuits the amygdala.
Wow. Yeah.
It pulls you out of the panic loop of the past and future and forces your neural pathways into the present moment. That's the stillness of the water drop on the web. And it's so important to note that this isn't about escaping reality.
That's a huge misconception, right? People think mindfulness is just zoning out.
It is the exact opposite. It is arriving fully inside reality. You are letting the glitter settle so you can actually see the spider, the forest, and the truth of your situation clearly. Anchoring ourselves in the present is the only way to prepare for what the droplet encounters next.
The weather.
The weather.
Yes, because you can only sit perfectly still on a web for so long before a gust of wind comes along or a storm rolls in. Which brings us to the psychological meat of this deep dive, our internal emotional weather.
The narrative explores how emotions are identical to passing weather systems. They arise naturally, they change the internal environment completely, and if left to their own devices, they pass. But humans do something very unnatural. We suppress them.
We hold the beach ball into the water.
Exactly. And remembering our first lesson about energy emotions are pure energy. When you suppress them, you are trapping that energy. The text notes that this trapped emotional energy can manifest as unexplained physical pain, exhaustion, chronic stress.
It has to go somewhere.
Right. Which introduces a monumental concept here, the Iceberg Theory of Emotions.
Okay, so picture an iceberg floating in the ocean. We all know the visual. The tip above the water is tiny, maybe 10% of the total mass. The other 90% is completely submerged, massive, and hidden.
The text uses this to explain our psychological makeup. That visible 10% above the water, that represents our surface emotions. It's the sudden sadness, the flash of anger in traffic, the daily frustration with a coworker.
It's the stuff we think we're reacting to.
Precisely, but it's the 90% submerged beneath the surface that dictates everything. That massive hidden structure is made up of our outmoded ways of thinking, our unresolved past, and crucially, the false stories we tell ourselves constantly without even realizing it.
Let's ground this in reality because the text gives a great anecdote about a child in school.
Oh, the boy with his name being called?
Yes, every time the teacher called this boy's name, he would immediately burst into tears. Now, on the surface, the 10%, it looks like irrational sadness or anxiety. But when someone actually paused to investigate the 90%, they found a false association.
A hidden story.
Right. The child subconsciously believed that a teacher saying his name meant he was in trouble. He had an internal story running that said, I am bad. I am being punished.
And once that hidden belief was exposed and questioned, the behavior completely changed. They told him he wasn't in trouble, and the tears stopped. He began to pause and respond normally.
I get how that works for a kid, but
Mhm.
how does this look for adults? Because I feel like adult icebergs are much more dangerous.
They absolutely are because they're heavily rationalized. Think about an adult reacting with explosive anger because their partner forgot to do the dishes.
Okay, classic argument.
Right. The dishes are the 10%, the minor inconvenience. But the 90% underneath is a false story saying, my partner doesn't respect my time, or I am completely alone in managing this life.
Wow. Yes. And if you're arguing about the dishes, you're just chipping away at the 10% while the rest of the iceberg tears a massive hole in your hull.
That's why the text warns that if we don't handle this, our hidden baggage will sink our relationships. And it spells it out just like that, as a pun on ships hitting icebergs.
And that's a clever way to put it.
It is. To prevent this, the narrative poses probably the most powerful question you can ask yourself in a moment of distress. What if the story I tell myself is not true?
What if the story I tell myself is not true? That literally forces you to look under the water.
It acts as a cognitive interrupt. By identifying these false stories, we apply the warmth of truth and awareness to a frozen belief system. We literally melt the iceberg. And as it melts, all that trapped, frozen energy is released back into the flow of your life.
Okay, so we've dropped our baggage in the campy, we've learned to find stillness on the web to see reality clearly, and we are learning to melt the massive emotional icebergs beneath our surface reactions.
We're making progress.
Yeah. That brings us to the final act of our droplets journey, which is all about the impact we leave behind. The drop eventually falls from the spider web and lands on a flower.
And here, a crucial transformation occurs. The flower shares its nectar with the water drop.
It gets sweet.
Yes. The drop mixes with this sweetness and fragrance. It's no longer just pure neutral water. It carries this new quality with it as it drips down into the soil.
It moves through the dark earth, past the mushrooms that are recycling stagnant energy, past the earthworms pulsing with life in the decay, and finally it hits a vast open space.
The groundwater.
Right. The droplet merges entirely into the massive, anonymous underground groundwater. It dissolves completely. But the text makes a specific point to say that it sweetens everything it touches.
This physical merging is the ultimate metaphor for human legacy. How do our individual acts ripple out into the broader whole? To explain this, the narrative introduces the concept of the two pots of goodness.
Okay.
And it says these pots are guarded by the mythical rainbow phoenix who lives near the moon.
Wait, time out, hold on. A rainbow phoenix near the moon. We're literally just talking about soil ecology, the physics of light refraction, and cognitive behavioral therapy with the icebergs. Where on earth did a mythical moonbird come from? It feels like we just took a hard left turn into a fantasy novel.
I know. It is an incredibly jarring shift in imagery, but there is a profound psychological reason for it.
Okay, I'm listening.
When we talk about massive, abstract concepts like accumulating love and kindness, which are what the two pots represent, human brains struggle to hold on to them. They sound like greeting card platitudes.
They do sound big cliche, yeah.
So the author uses mythic, almost surreal archetypes to bridge the gap between dry philosophy and felt human experience. The phoenix is a universal symbol of rebirth. It represents the psychological resurrection that happens when you consistently choose kindness over cynicism. The pots aren't just ledgers, they're sacred duties. We fill them by actively remembering times we gave care and times we received it.
Okay, I see. It's a way to make the abstract feel monumental. But let me ask you this. Let's look at where the water drop ends up. It completely dissolves into the groundwater.
Right.
If we are all just one tiny drop in a massive, anonymous subterranean river of billions of other people, does our individual sweetness actually matter? Does it make a difference if I fill my pots of goodness, if I'm just a drop in an ocean of chaos?
It is the only thing that matters. Let's look at the behavioral psychology behind pro-social actions. When you perform an act of kindness, when you offer sweetness, it doesn't just evaporate into the void.
It does something real.
Yes, it creates a neurological feedback loop. Doing good actually builds resilience, lowers stress hormones, and increases empathy in the giver and the receiver. But here's the catch. You can only give what you have cultivated. If you haven't filled your pots with love, you have nothing to deposit into the environment around you.
So the groundwater metaphor isn't just poetic.
Exactly. It's a biological and social reality. Think back to the very first lesson of the leaf. The leaf drops to become nutrients for the entire tree. Our individual acts of kindness, our emotional regulation, our melted icebergs, these are the literal nutrients that feed the ecosystem of humanity. Your sweetness elevates the quality of the entire reservoir.
This has been a truly incredible journey. If we look at the arc of everything we've unpacked today, it's a profound blueprint for the human mind.
It really is.
We started by challenging our rigidity, learning from belief that every loss is just a transformation of energy. We observed a droplet on a spider web and realized that we have to let the glitter settle in our minds if we want to reflect reality without distortion.
We plunged underwater to look at the hidden 90% of our emotional icebergs, realizing that our false stories are what actually sink us.
Right. And finally, we saw that cultivating our own sweetness isn't selfish. It is the vital nutrient required to sustain the groundwater of humanity.
And the takeaway for you, listening right now, is highly actionable. You have permission to let your emotions pass like weather. You have the power to stop and ask, what if the story I'm telling myself isn't true? You have the capacity to cultivate stillness today.
But I want to leave you with one final thought, something that goes just one step past where our story ended. We talked a lot about the droplet merging into the vast groundwater. But if you know anything about the water cycle, well, you know that water doesn't stay underground forever.
No, it doesn't.
Eventually, it finds the surface. It is drawn up by the sun. It evaporates back into the atmosphere, gathering into new clouds. So you go through your week cultivating your 2 pots of goodness, melting your icebergs, and adding your unique sweetness to the reservoir. Ask yourself this. When your drop eventually evaporates from this life, what kind of legacy will you be raining down on the generations that come next?